Hi, and welcome to Metro East Community Media here in Gresham, Oregon. We'd like to welcome you to the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. It's the 13th of February, 2016, and I have a wonderful young man with me today by the name of Mr. Marion Ellsworth, and we're going to chat. I love interesting stories, and I'm sure he's got a few. So we'd like to welcome you, Mr. Ellsworth.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure, sir.
Same here.
And I'm going to ask you a few simple questions. We're going to start with the hard one first. Where did you grow up?
In Sydney, Nebraska.
Sydney, Nebraska. Corn center of the country?
Yes, yes.
And you then went to high school where?
In Sydney High School.
Sydney High School. They keep the name simple there, don't they?
Yes, yes.
I was in Nebraska briefly. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but it was very warm and very humid,
Yeah,
I found out.
it does that.
So you then were how old? You got out of high school and you decided to enlist in the Navy?
Yes,
And how old were you?
19.
19 years old.
You want me to elaborate on that?
I would love to have you elaborate on that.
Well, there was no jobs available, and I see this ad for the Navy. I wanted to go to diesel school, diesel mechanic. That was becoming popular. But I didn't have the money to go to the trade school, so I had to find something else. So I see this ad for the Navy over the recruiting officer close to the one was in Sterling, Colorado. So I went over to talk to the recruiter and told him my desires about wanting to take diesel mechanics training. He said, well, that would work out fine. You can go to military training a half a day and military training a half a day. I thought, boy, that's what I want. It ended up that's the last I ever heard of diesel training. So anyway, I signed up and enlisted in Denver, Colorado, then went on over to San Diego for boot camp training. So that's how I got in the Navy.
And they did have boot camp in San Diego. A number of years ago, they closed San Diego down. I believe they have all their training now at Great Lakes.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
So things have changed. So share your thoughts with me as a young man ending up in boot camp, and all those folks that seemed to be nice before you got to boot camp, all of a sudden the attitudes changed. What was your attitude?
Yes, we took the train. They treated us wonderfully. We had sleeper cars and good meals, and boy, everybody was just happy. We get out to San Diego, a truck picked us up. It took us out to the base, and as soon as we got inside the gate, had these Marines there started yelling at us, hollering and orders around. We all thought we made a mistake. So it was the middle of the night. It took us up to barracks and threw a blanket at us and assigned us a bunk for the night. And up early next morning, beans for breakfast, which was all right, and then on to, after breakfast, issuing clothes and go, go, go from then on. Yell at you all the time. So we all thought we'd made a mistake, but it turned out all right. So.
That seems to be the general consensus after the first day or the first evening in boot camp is, what on earth have you done to yourself?
Right.
Now, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do when you got into the Navy? Because obviously when everybody went in, especially then, a little different than today where you can go in with some education, go in with some rank into boot camp. Then everybody started even keel, no rank, and you had to earn it. And then after you took tests and did some certain qualification to boot camp, then you were assigned what we called an MOS. I don't know what the Navy called it then. Must have been military service, military. Marine Corps was MOS. Of course, Marine Corps department, come from the Department of the Navy. So, my thanks to the Navy. Otherwise, I'd still be lost in the jungle. But how many weeks of boot camp did you have then?
I think they were starting to cut down things then because they're starting to build the Navy up. And it must have been 4 months. I really don't remember. Yeah, I knew what I wanted, like I say, diesel. But they put a bunch of us in the room and sent a bunch of dots and dashes, and you had to write down whether it was a dot or a dash, not what it meant. And they told me, said, we're sending you to aviation radio school. So that's where I got started on the radio.
So dots and dashes, and you went to aviation radio school,
right.
which was communications then.
Yeah.
I'll be darned. So when you graduated from boot camp, where did you go to aviation radio school?
North Island.
Yes, I'm familiar with North Island Naval Air Station.
Yeah.
Very busy. Seaplanes, PBY is flying, still flying in and out of there, I think. Interesting place, North Island. So did you enjoy your stay there, North Island? Silver Strand, actually?
Yeah, it was I got sick there, got what they called cat fever. It's like nowadays, if you get sick, it's the flu. Back then it was cat fever, catarrhal fever. Everything that you had was a cat fever.
Cat fever?
Catarrhal fever.
Catarrhal fever. Where'd that name come from?
Catarrhal.
Just catarrhal?
Yeah. So I'd been in school for some time and felt bad, but I was feeling better. In fact, feeling pretty good. I still stayed in school. I went down after school, I went down to the pharmacy mate to get an aspirin for my headache, and he took my temperature and threw me in the isolation ward. And because there's no doctor there, and the next morning the doctor come in, and then they sent me over to the Naval Hospital. And all the symptoms that I told him was opposite of what he wrote down in my record, everything that refers to catarrhal fever. It was going to make it catarrhal fever regardless. Anyway, they sent me over there, and they about starved me to death over there and worked me to death, put me on a limited diet, and give me some light duty to do at the hospital, and had to carry my own pack over there, and had a long landing going up to the hospital. Had to pack my gear out of the boat and up the hill, and no help at all. So that was a bad trip. So they finally let me out and went back to finish school. And then the top people in the class had a choice of about five different places they could go. There was the Seattle Naval Air Station, and Cruiser, Hawaii, Cocosolo, and I don't know what else was. Anyway, my buddy was from Seattle, and he wasn't high enough to choose, so he said Seattle's a nice place, so I chose Seattle, which was really nice. They just improved, put in new barracks, and they called it the those Navy. Anyway, a real nice place, and so I stayed with Patrol Squadron 41 and 42, served in both of them for a while, and then at that time, anybody that went to Asiatic Fleet, the reason they went because they goofed up. Well, my buddy had gotten VD, so he put his name on the list, and then I found my name on the list. The reason was that I stood a radar watch up in the administration building, and then I went down to the galley, because they had me on duty down there afterwards. And the cook says, well, you look tired, your eyes are red. And I said, well, I already stood one watch. He says, well, that's not fair. Go on back, hit your sack. Well, then an officer come along, put me on report for not reporting for duty in the galley. So that's how my name got on the list to go to the Asiatic Fleet. Communication officer got wind of it, and he said, well, that isn't fair, you don't have to go. But my buddy couldn't get out of it, I wanted to stay with him. So off we go down to Frisco, and took the old USS Henderson out to the Philippines. And that was the beginning of the tour out there. So
USS Henderson. Now, you mentioned the Seattle Naval Station.
Yeah.
Is that under another name now? What was it? Was it in the area of Bremerton?
No, right outside of Seattle.
Just outside of Seattle. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now you mentioned patrol. Will you elaborate on that a little bit? Patrol assignment, patrol boats, shore patrol. What patrol were you assigned to before you left and went to the Pacific?
Patrol. Was it with the PBYs?
PBYs, is that what you were assigned with?
Yeah.
PBYs, okay. So you got some flying in on PBYs.
Very little bit, yeah.
A little bit, and they were running out of Seattle.
Yes, off Lake Washington.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Took forever to get off the water.
Well, I can imagine.
And at that time, they had to wheel them out there and take the wheels off, and then they come back in and put the wheels back on to get them back up on the... But they didn't give much... it kind of went by rank, because you got flight pay when you went up.
Oh, yeah.
And the government was so tight then, they wouldn't spend any money. So guess who got the flight pay? So I got very little. So.
Well, what's changed?
Yeah.
So you end up leaving there, and you go to San Francisco, and to back up just a moment, you were on what ship when you went to Hawaii, went to the Pacific?
First ship I went to, that was in the Asiatic Fleet, was USS Stewart.
Stewart, USS Stewart.
Yeah, DD-224.
Well, you got a great memory, DD-224.
Yes.
Well, it just seems to me that this is the 224.
It is.
Right here. What we have here on the table, if you can get a push in on that, can we get a push in on this model of the ship? That's a nice shot right there. Now you referred to this as a what kind of a ship?
Four-stacker.
Four-stacker. Four-stacker.
So you had two engine rooms and 2 fire rooms.
2 engine rooms, 2 fire rooms, and here you 4 stacks.
Yeah.
And that's what the reference is to a 4-stacker. So how long did you spend on that ship?
Now we go into the battles.
That's what I want to hear.
Well, all the time we were out looking for Japanese. Spent all the time taking on fuel out there looking for the Japanese. You get the report the Japanese were out there, and we was out looking for them. Of course, the information was so scarce and false that we were spent all the time looking for them. And at that time, everybody just couldn't wait to get out there and kick butt for the Japanese. Boy, we were really everybody was just so anxious to get out there and do battle, which as time went by, kind of lost their enthusiasm. But anyway, we done a lot of patrol work, looking for tracking down submarines and all that stuff. That the final Battle of Bedong Straits, and Japanese were landing troops on Bali, and they had decided that 2 units would go in. The first unit of 4 destroyers went in and attacked them and stirred them up. And then after they come out, we were supposed to go in. We carried the division commander, and he was in charge of the 4 ships, and he was aboard our ship. Anyway, I remember standing out on deck before I went on duty in the radio room. You could see him still firing in there before we went in. So the division commander said, his name was Binford, said that it was too dangerous. He wasn't going to take his ships in. And our skipper, which was Page Smith, said, well, this is my ship. I'm going in. So we went in and attacked him. And that was a wild ride. I was in the radio room. The radio room was right in here on the port side, right on the main deck, right in back of the #1 gun. And that was a wild ride because you couldn't tell what was going on. With all the noise, with the shrapnel bouncing around and the other guns firing, our guns firing. And so anyway, when it was all said and done, we did score 9 hits on the other ships, on Japanese ships. But we took some hits ourselves. We had they say 8-inch, but I think they were 5-inch. 5-inch shell went clear through the stern here, about a 4-foot hole. One took the motor whaleboat out, and the other took the galley out.
Oh, boy.
So that was all at night. So we pulled into Surabaya, Java, where that was our home port, and that was all mined. We had to have a pilot take us in and out.
Mm-hmm.
Most times, a few times we slipped in, but anyway, we made it into port after the battle, and so the next day they were going to fix. It was a Dutch dry dock and a marine dry dock where you put the ship in there and then pull the dry dock up out of water.
Oh, yeah.
So they got it almost out of the water and they hadn't shored it up right, and it flipped over on the side. So, of course, I was in the radio room right down in here when it turned over. It turned over on this port side, and it punctured the oil tanks and bent one shaft and done some other damage. And Surabaya was being bombed every day, so they figured they couldn't fix it up, so they decided to abandon it and transfer everybody to different ships. In the meantime, we took all the stuff that was salvageable off the Stewart and took it to other ships. Well, I was assigned to a work party to go over and get stores and stuff off there and take it to other ships. So we take the motor whaleboat over there, and it was a long way up, walkway up to the dry dock from we'd get on the ship. So this one day we was working away. I was way down the hold, taking some stuff out of the hold, and if there was an air raid, we'd run up and run down there, jump in the motor whaleboat, and go out and sit out in the bay. Well, it got awful quiet this one day, so I come topside to see what was going on, and the air raid was going on. I looked down, the motor whaleboat was pulled away from the dock, so I got stuck there by myself, and talk about praying. So I ran up and jumped behind 2 great big winches on the dry dock and stayed there until it was over with. And there was a lot of bombs were dropped, but in the warehouses next to us and so forth, but it didn't hit our dry dock. So we stayed in barracks then until they decided what to do with us. While I was in the barracks, we was over shooting debris with the Limey anti-aircraft unit, and a Japanese bomber snuck in and dropped the bomb. By the time we realized that, it was too late. I ran over and jumped behind a palm tree, and the bomb hit the next palm tree over, and there was nothing left there, so wouldn't have done me any good. So anyway, it's trying to decide. They split us all up between about 3 other ships, and I was scheduled to go aboard the USS Pillsbury. But as until the 3rd class radioman's reserve had just come aboard, and he went with me. He took some of my clothes and some of my stuff. We were going to go to the Pillsbury, and he offered to take some of my stuff. We were just walking down the dock, going to go aboard the Pillsbury, and the last minute they changed my orders. I went to John D. Ford. I took the place of a guy that had been hit by shrapnel in the butt and in the back. They transferred him to the tender, so I took his place. My first battle station was here at emergency radio, and that's where his battle station was. And in the previous battle, he got hit there and got wounded, so they sent him, as I said, to the tender, so I took his place. After that, we abandoned manning the emergency radio because everybody had two jobs. We were short-handed, and everybody was just about exhausted, going all night in general quarters, and those long hours was brutal.
I can imagine the long hours. So you were not based in Hawaii. You were a Java. You had a shipyard, a dry dock.
Yeah, I never spent much time until later. I was stationed in Pearl Harbor for a while, but afterwards.
Yeah.
So anyway, it ended up that Pillsbury was lost with all hands, and we didn't know until after the war, got from the Japanese records what happened to her.
Pillsbury. Wonder where that name came from.
I don't know, but it's another four-stack, one of our...
For another four-stacker?
We had 13 of them over there, 13 four-stackers. I have a friend that's a naval historian that has written a book about it, and he's got another book coming out too that tells all the story of what happened to all those ships. The Pillsbury and the Edsel, we didn't know until after the war what happened to those. Got those from the Japanese records.
Pillsbury and the Edsel,
yes.
You said. Another four-stacker.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, who's writing the book on that? That's somebody you served with?
No, somebody that's never in service. He's connected with the Houston Survivors Association, and he has all the history on that and works on that. So anything connected with the Asiatic fleets, especially the Four-Stacker Association. So he's got so much information. Of course, he's a book writer. So I've met him, and I give him a lot of information, and he gave me a lot of information. But he's interviewed so many people. He's gone to Japan, interviewed the Japanese. Now the Japanese of course, we had a newspaper of our own we put out every day, and it wasn't much of a newspaper, but they'd copy the national news and so forth. And the Japanese had a newspaper too, and so that's how he got the information about what happened to these ships from the Japanese newspapers they put out, and the Japanese naval records too. But he got so much information about how many shots were fired and how long it took to sink them and all that stuff. And there's so many things involved in that operation. So then I went to the John D. Ford, and so I stayed as a radioman there then, of course, and served on #1 gun at times. And so then the Battle of Java Sea, like I say, we'd been out looking for this Japanese force. There was supposed to be a big one out there. I was out on deck then up in #1 gun, just looking, and I looked over the horizon, looked just like a matchstick in the horizon.
Mm-hmm.
Then a few minutes later, you see some puffs of smoke, and then 2 minutes later, the shells started landing. Of course, that's about 20-some miles away.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was about, we was all getting ready to go into the minefield to go back into Surabaya when this happened. So we turned around, went back out, and then we started closing on them. Then the battle began. And that started about 3 in the afternoon. We fought until 11 o'clock at night. And part of our job, the destroyers, any destroyers, laying down smoke screens to adjust the burners.
Oh, yeah.
And so they put out a lot of smoke. Wouldn't burn clean. So we'd lay down smoke screen to hide our other bigger ships. And we also launched our torpedoes. At one time, there was 100 torpedoes in the water at one time between what the Japanese fired and what we fired. I stood on the deck on the port side up forward, and we looked stern, and we seen there's more than one mate, another guy or two. We see this torpedo heading for us. See the wake? We yelled at the bridge to change course. We had a guy on the sound powered forn that was connected to the bridge. He was hollering at him to change course, and we finally got their attention, and they changed course just a little. And I stood on the port side and looked down the water and watched that torpedo go right down within 10 feet of our ship. And we were doing knots, and they went right by us. Well, that was kind of exciting.
So just missed you.
Yeah.
On the stern?
No, I was up here.
Oh, you're up in the front. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Number one gun.
Yeah.
Wow. Close call. Now, you're talking about turning knots. This ship compared to other ships, was this pretty fast?
Yeah, about 35.
You could run about 35 knots with it, so it could move, do damage, and then get out of the area.
That was one advantage we had over the Japanese. We was about 1 knot faster than theirs, and when we escaped from Java, that's probably saved us from running the blockade.
Mm-hmm.
We just had a little bit. Well, we got to jump on them to begin with, but so then after Java Sea battle, we all split up, and the Houston went to Tanjong Priok with the Perth, because they had to go around to Badang, or the strait on the other end of the island, because it was deep water. But we had the shallow draft, so we could go through Valley Straits, which was shallow water. We only had a draft about 12 feet, so we got into water about 12 feet deep. And I can still remember that. There again, I was out on number one gun. It was a moonlight night. I can still see it so plain. Those waves were breaking on the beach. Beautiful moonlight night.
That's amazing how those memories never go away.
So,
the good parts of the journey.
So we went through Valley Straits and headed out in the Indian Ocean, and so of course they had should have known where we were escaping, because we had no Air Force, but they had an Air Force, so they should have been tracking us. Should have known it was. Well, I'll back up a little, because after the Java Sea battle, the next day we went back into Surabaya and had to make a decision what to do. One thing was we were going to scuttle the ship and take the railroad over to Jilajap, the other side of the island, and catch a merchant ship. Well, it's too late. The Japanese were active over there, so they give up on that. So the only thing we could do is make a run for it. So we waited until late afternoon, and 4 of us decided to make the run for it. So we were in line. We were the third ship in line. And like I say, we got out just going in the Indian Ocean, and I looked out to port, and there was this big Japanese destroyer sitting there, and just barely moving. No wake could speak at all. Couldn't figure out why they didn't fire on us. 2 ships had gone by, and we were the third one, and couldn't figure out why they didn't open fire. I still don't know why, unless they thought we had torpedoes and they were a dead target. I don't know. But anyway, when we got out there, then he opened fire on us, and we exchanged some fire, but we got so far ahead we couldn't train the gun I was on back far enough to stern to fire on them. That was one time I was on them when we fired it, and so I was up by the muzzle taking the fireworks, and the gun captain decided to fire, and I thought I'd been hit. I couldn't hear, couldn't see, and but anyway, we just kept going. But there was 3 destroyers sitting out there, 1 to port and 2 to to starboard, and we just kept running. So, like I say, we had that 1 knot advantage and got far enough ahead. But we figured the planes would get us the next day. But it ended up the weather was bad, so they weren't flying. And then we run into weather. I was more scared of that than I was on the firing or under the battle, because we'd go over those big waves, and the ship would go down and hit bottom. I thought sure it was going to break in two.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen anything so horrifying. But we just kept going ahead for Australia. So.
Sounds to me like with the speed of these ships, around 35 knots, that they were used for reconnaissance, harassment.
A destroyer used for everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's the workhorse of the Navy.
So they're quite effective.
Yeah. So.
Now, you headed to Australia. What year was this? What was the time period?
42.
Now we jumped up to 42 because you went in the Navy in 1940.
Yeah.
And then, of course, December 7th came along, a day that will live in infamy. And then you got pretty active in the Pacific. So you headed to Australia. What did you do in Australia?
Well, we made it down to Fremantle. Well, there's a lot in between there, too. We went down to the north. Get that mental blocks. Anyway, the big port down on the north, and picked up convoys during this time, which is awful dangerous. Brought convoys of material up to Sarawak, and so I'd been there too. So anyway, went into Fremantle, and kind of funny. I'd lost some of my clothes when the ship turned on its side, and so I only had one old pair of shoes. So they called inspection. Everybody lined up, and I had these old shoes. All I had, so I'd gone over to the civilian, got a pair of civilian shoes. So I got chewed out for having civilian shoes.
Weren't military issue, were they? Now, but you, between 40 and 46, you were in the Navy. Now, if you were in these conflicts after 41, how long did you spend in the Pacific? Because you were in the Dutch East Indies?
Yeah.
How many years did you spend in the Pacific between 41 and 45?
Well, I went in 42. We came back to the States then. But the radio gear, everything was obsolete on there. The radio gear, the receivers was so old. To change bands, you had to lift the top open and pull on the coil, plug another coil in. And they were all DC sets. My job was to take care of all those DC batteries, lead-acid batteries. We had a big locker full of lead-acid batteries. I had to take care of those. So everything was DC and so obsolete. You barely look at those receivers and then go off frequency. And the emergency transmitter was an old spark transmitter. It's unbelievable. But anyway, we come back to the States finally, and that was in 42. And we come into Frisco, and then they gave half the crew leave, and then they was going to take a convoy out to Pearl Harbor, and then we come back. The other half would get leave. Well, on the way over to take convoy over the first time, I got transferred. I was madder than heck to ComDes pack his flag. his flag, his staff, Commander of Destroyer Pacific. He was in charge of all the destroyers in the Pacific, so I was on his staff. And so I went aboard the USS Dixie. She was a new destroyer tender in Pearl Harbor, and we went aboard her and stayed there and housed there and used their radio room, but we weren't ship's company. And then she was sent out to South Pacific, so we went to, according to records, I went to a couple other ships too, but I don't think I did. They just transferred the flag.
Oh.
So then we set up a radio station on the beach, Pearl Harbor, and we had 4 cabins there and the radio station, and I stayed there for several months. And then I was 3rd class then, and they had a full complement of 2nd class, and anybody got 2nd class would be shipped out. Well, I found out you could get hurt out there, so I didn't want to go out voluntarily, so they come out with the directive anybody made 2nd class would go back to the States for a new ship. And they said a destroyer. So I put in for it and got it. I was one of the first ones to come back to the States. And what do I get? Get a subchaser out of Miami, a wooden subchaser, 110 feet long. Me and the quartermaster was the only 2 people that served aboard a Navy ship, and including the officers. And that thing was a joke. Every time they would get a sounding, thought they picked up a sub, the officers strap on their guns and all that stuff, big shots, and we never did sink anything. But anyway, we went from Charleston up to Norfolk, and we got in a big storm off Cape Hatteras and thought sure was going to sink. The waves were so high. I tried to radio shore station to take a bearing on to see where we were, and the waves were drowning out my antenna. It was a wooden ship. They had to caulk it every time we went in, but it was new. And salt water got in my typewriter and in my radio gear, so I couldn't use it. We had a chair to sit in, and they had cleats in the deck fastened to the chair to sit there, and it even pulled the cleats out of the deck. It was so rough. I had a striker radioman and another 3rd class radioman. They were so sick they couldn't stand watch. Hardly anybody could. We had a cat as a mascot. Even the cat got sick. But we thought sure it was going to go down. But we made it into Norfolk, and I got transferred, thank goodness. So I put a new destroyer escort into commission, and we done, after shakedown and all that stuff, we done a lot of convoy duty, taking ships over to Europe. One convoy, I think there was 800 ships, would rendezvous out in the Atlantic and go from there. We carried a doctor. We were fortunate enough to carry a doctor, and if anybody got sick, he'd take a breeches buoy over there, or else he'd transfer the patient over to our ship on breeches buoy, and that was kind of exciting. But the rest of it was, if a ship broke down or something, we'd have to stay back till they got fixed and got ready to go again. And we brought a lot of prisoners back from Europe. Mm-hmm. Had this one group of Germans, and his German got sick, and so they brought him over to our ship on breeches buoy, and he was scared to begin with, and he had appendicitis, so the doctor decided to operate on him. We weren't set up for that, but he operated on him, and it was successful, but he was one scared German, and had quite a few exciting things about that. So,
well, you spent time in the Pacific. You got around.
Yeah.
The Japanese in the Pacific, and I like the story about hiding behind the palm tree because I can relate to that. I, on occasion, found one little tree in the middle of nowhere, and you'd be amazed how small one can get. That you feel safe behind a little skinny tree when you need to do that. But then you end up on the East Coast in the Atlantic dealing with the German prisoners. That's that's why we like these stories, because you need to get that out. These fun stories, horrific stories, memories that young men and women have experienced that nobody ever asks about. They just go unheard, and it's wonderful. And what I do want to do, though, if we can get a close-up right here, I want to show you a very handsome young man. If we can get in on that, like most, movie star. Look at that young man, Mr. Marion Ellsworth. My, oh my. We look at ourselves and think that was a long time ago. What
Yes.
memories.
Yep.
What memories. That's wonderful. So we've learned something about your life that otherwise we wouldn't have known. And
Can I tell you more?
oh, I'd love to. If we've got time here, we're going to get time. What do you have to say?
Well, I'll tell you, after we done convoy duty, we were assigned to a killer group going after German subs. We had a small carrier and 4 destroyer escorts. We formed a line. Of course, I took a message every day of where they thought subs were, and then, of course, the planes would go out and search too. But we just formed this line and sweep the ocean. So this one day, a German sub got between us and this other destroyer escort, and he said he could only take one, so he took this other destroyer escort and torpedoed it, and he went down about 15 minutes, and we were assigned to pick up survivors, and then the group chased him for about 12 hours and really forced him to come up, and the skipper and some of the crew bailed out, so they took prisoners of war, and so then later on we had reunions together. They come over from Germany, and some of the crew members and the skipper. In fact, the skipper spent the rest of his life over here, and he parked his RV, and one of the survivors of the ship, he sank. But we had a good reunion together.
A lot of stories like that. Now, that was in the Atlantic. Did you get into the Channel? Get anywhere around the Channel?
No,
Britain? You didn't get in that far.
no. But like I say, I was a radioman, so we had the ECM, electric coded machine,
Mm-hmm.
and you're supposed to have clearance to run it, but and get a message that had to be broke down. You'd have to wake an officer up, and they grumble and everything. And most of them couldn't type very good. It's just like a typewriter, It's got those 4 wheels in there that got to be adjusted according to the book. Same with the recognition signals. We had a book there that I had to give them the recognitions every day, and so anyway, we got to taking over the ECM, the coded messages, the ones that was for us. So we'd go in there and break it down, or encode messages. It was kind of neat. I used to break down a lot of stuff that wasn't us, just to see what the hell's going on in the world. And,
So you were out there hacking with the antiquated equipment. It would be called hacking today in computer terms.
broke the monotony.
Broke the monotony. I love that.
Well, radioman was the best job in the Navy there, because we were out of the weather, and we had a coffee pot and a toaster in there. We'd bring bread up from the galley and cheese and everything, so we had it made. living in there.
Well, I know one thing. Maybe you disagree with me. I think the Navy ate pretty well on the ships.
Oh, yeah.
They ate pretty well.
Yeah. So, yeah, we, and if you smoked, you could smoke there. There's no problem.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said that you're, having been born growing up, at least until you went in the Navy, you were in Nebraska, but then what brought you to Oregon?
Well, my folks had moved out here for a job from Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
So we were living in St. Augustine, which we liked real well. And we were going to come out and see how it was out here. And we didn't like it was going back there because my wife had a job and everything. So,
But you said there were a lot of jobs here, especially during the war, with shipyards, supporting the war effort. So a lot of people gravitated to this area, into Seattle and to the Bay Area. Now, when you came into San Francisco, did you spend any time at Alameda, or were you there long enough before you went back to Hawaii?
No.
Just in and out?
Yeah. This other sub I was involved in the sinking. They had weather subs that send the weather back to Germany, because about 3 days hence it'd be in Germany. So they had the high frequency transmitters, so we got the equipment to pick it up and got their books. So we had a crew that manned that. So it's one day the sub would come up and broadcast a short message, and 3 of the ships took a bearing on him. So we dropped depth charges on him and pretty well attacked him, but we brought up some human flesh and oil and songbooks and pipes and personal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the Navy wouldn't give us any credit for sinking until after the war, when the communication office went back to Germany, and they never heard from the sub after that. So we pretty well sank that German sub.
Memories after memory after memory. We're going to wrap this up, and I'll tell you what, Mr. Ellsworth, it's been an absolute pleasure. I love the stories. We could go on for the next day and a half, but we're sure grateful that you've shared your experiences. Otherwise, we wouldn't know.
Well, just remember, you can brag you've talked to a genuine Asiatic fleet 4-stacker sailor.
Genuine Asiatic fleet
4-stacker.
4-stacker
Sailor. Yes, they're a rare breed.
A breed, because I noticed the patch. You have the patch.
And so.
And I did want to say to those folks watching that Marion is the current commander of VFW Post 1442. And in closing, why are you still doing that? You're shaking your head.
I have no idea.
You know, that's what most commanders say. That's because somebody else wants you to do it. That's why. But we're going to close out. And thank you for joining us for the Veterans History Project. And until next time, you have a safe trip.